Welcome in everyone to the CFR Draft Roundtable. I am your host, EJ Daniels, and we are here again doing defensive tackle prospects. We are in the trenches today, and this is a position that is near and dear to my heart because I played defensive tackle, and Greg also played defensive tackle. So this is something that is very familiar to me. So before we get started, I would like for us to go and tell the people where they can find us. Our Twitter handles aren't up right now, but I want you guys to let them know where they can find you and interact with you. So TFC, we'll start with you.
You can find me at Thomas Frank Carr. I am the only person here that didn't play defensive tackle, which also tells me that I'm also the shortest person that's in this draft chat. So awesome.
Yeah, and you could find me at the Sports Bully 1 on Twitter. All my stuff comes through there. So if you're looking for any content, at the Sports Bully 1.
All right, and you can find me, EJ Daniels, at eDaniels77 on Twitter. I am here for all your hot takes. So, as we get into our defensive tackle prospect, the first one we will do today is Alim McNeill from NC State. Now, I was able to watch some of his tape, and I must say, first thing that jumps out at me is his explosion. I think he's really explosive. I said that he has big, broad shoulders, thick hips, thick thighs, things like that. He's a big guy, and he's definitely a disruptor in the run game and also, pass rushing. He's a good guy, explosive with his hands, has a quick first step. I really liked how he played against the zone runs and how he was able, to get that off arm loose, move laterally, and make a play. So, Greg, since this is your trap, this is where you have made your living, you start us off and tell us what you think about Alim McNeill.
All right, definitely. I think we should preface the whole night by I don't think there's a ton of real high-level star power in this draft, especially as it pertains to defensive tackles. But I will say what I do like about him first. Like you said, he is a big, powerful guy. He is a disruptor. So you watch his tape, and he's got a great power step. And for those guys that don't know that, your power step is your first step of contact. So he does have a great get off, and he's able to, with that step, come with his hands. So if you do watch his film, you're going to see a lot of guys getting jolted back. So he does own the line of scrimmage. He'll push it back. He will be a disruptor. I don't think necessarily he has a lot to offer in the outside the box, so to speak. But he does play the zero technique. He does eat a lot of blocks. He takes up a lot of space. He is a disruptor. He is somebody who could definitely, challenge in the middle and make life a lot easier for the linebackers. But some of the things I wasn't really impressed with him because I was told, that he's one of the top 2 or 3 guys. And if you're looking for someone to just dominate the line of scrimmage and eat blocks and be that guy, then McNeill's your man. But I saw a lot of tape of him just kind of hovering around the line of scrimmage where he's content with just kind of wrestling a block, and that's that. So I was a little disappointed with after the fact, where he seemed to just eat a block, and that was it. That was his job. He was good with that, whether it was on the line of scrimmage or not. And he seems to. I don't really like his football instincts. There's a lot of plays where he's late to disengage from his block and find the football. You could look at him a lot of times, his head's swiveling around. He has no idea where the football is. So that's concerning to me. I like him as a block eater, a disruptor, a big, strong, powerful man who's going to, be a handful for the guard or the center to handle. I don't like his instincts, and I won't call it his effort. I'm just not a big fan of his production outside of his gap.
I want to echo some of those same sentiments because when I was watching him, I was like, man, they say he was the number 1 defense or the best defensive tackle prospect, and I'm just not seeing it. I'm not saying he's garbage or anything like that. It's just the way they was hyping him up, it didn't match the film. And see, that's why you watch film, to see for yourself, and you trust your own evaluation as to, hey, this guy is here or this guy is there. So TFC, tell us what you saw from Alim McNeill.
Well, for the first thing is I think that this is the guy that fits perfectly for the Bills because he does the one thing that 0 people on the Bills roster do, and that is stop the run, like primary run stopper. And as you mentioned, EJ, he's explosive, he's quick, Now, after his first step, he is not athletic. But for the first step, and when he gets his hands on, on the center or the guard, he's unblockable on that first step. So if he needs to get into his gap, he gets into his gap. And basically anything that he's on the front side of, if you're playing inside zone and you want to run to his side, one of the reasons I think he didn't have as many, tackles for loss or stops or any, stats like that is because everyone cut back. Like he stopped so many front side, either inside or outside zones because that quickness you can't really reach block him. And if you try to double team him, you've wasted 2 linemen. Like he doesn't move. So for what the Bills need, they need somebody to protect their smaller defensive tackles, to protect Ed Oliver, Quentin Jefferson if he comes back this year in 2021. I think that's what this guy does. And I do think that there's some untapped potential from him as a nose tackle. He has no plan as a pass rusher. If I were to draft him, I'd say, Aleem, every single play is a run play. They're just special runs. So I want you to play on pass plays like you would on a run play because his bull rush is phenomenal. Like there's no reason he shouldn't be in the quarterback's lap on every play. So I think that there's more to give there. But honestly, I don't even care about that. Like I just want one guy who will stop the run and let everyone else play pass around him. And if he gets to the point where he is productive from that A gap sort of nose tackle, because the Bills aren't going to play a nose tackle, they're going to play, in the A gap. I think that's very valuable. And I think that that's something that he can bring to a team immediately and is a starter. Like, he can bring that one thing. And then on obvious passing downs, he's not going to be in the game. You don't need to have him there.
And to echo some of your same sentiments, I felt that same way. I'm watching him. Like, if you are the number 1 or number 2 best defensive tackle prospect, I'm expecting you, like you said, Greg, when you were telling me what to look for, I'm expecting you to give me something in the passing game, in pass rushing, something elite at least, if you're the number 1 or 2 prospect. So I didn't see that from him. I didn't see much of a plan either. I just saw athleticism. And while NFL teams can use it, like you said, TFC, he's going to need some polish. But if you are looking for him to stop that run game, he can do that, especially on those zone runs. I watched UNC versus North Carolina State from 2019, and they must have ran about 4 straight zone run plays, and he must have crushed every single one of them. So if the Bills Mafia and the Bills are looking for a run defender who has potential to be a great pass rusher, I mean, I think this is their guy. But, where do you think the Bills should draft him, Greg? Where would you feel comfortable?
And that's what my point was going to get to is, Star Lotulelei is getting up there in age, and he wasn't here last year. We don't know what kind of guy we're going to get next year. I think we're all pretty much on the same page. Vernon Butler is going to be cut. Harrison Phillips is going into a contract year next year. So we don't really have an heir apparent nose tackle type of block eater like a Lotulelei. So yes, McNeil makes sense there. But if the consensus opinion is that he's a first round fringe player, that doesn't make sense for me for what the Bills need. Can we use a player like him, potentially in the 3rd round or with one of our 5th round picks? I'm not saying he's going to be there, but a player with his skill set makes sense to me later on because it's not a necessity right now. And I don't think McNeil is somebody that comes in here and completely, utterly turns our defense into the 80, the Bears, So I like the kid for that. But to me, if I'm going to waste a 1st round pick on you, you have to be all I need. That we have every other base covered. We got pass rushers. We can cover people. We got great linebackers. We just need a big body, and we're going to throw them at you. So, like I said, with him, I could say if all bets were off and it was just I was the GM and I could pick him wherever I wanted to, I wouldn't consider him before the 3rd round.
Yeah. To your point, Greg, I wrote down some notes because, again, like I told you guys, he was on 2-for-1 Drafts, the PFF podcast, the draft podcast, right? So he said he's currently working. I forgot where he's working now. I think he might be down in Florida. I'm not 100% sure, but he said he's working on his diet, right? He says he wants to get down to, I think it was like 3% body fat, something like that. He said he's wants to eat no red meat, right? And he said
that's
this
no
year,
fun.
Right.
What kind of nose guard wants to get down to 3% body fat, not eating red meat?
Yeah.
That's my next one. He said it that this year at NC State, his last year, he was playing at 340. He says he wants to get down to like 290 or something like that. That's where he feels comfortable, and that's where he feels that he's going to be the most athletic and he's going to be a playmaker. And then he used to play basketball. So I don't know if you guys saw the clip I just put up about I play defensive line like I'm playing basketball. He says he uses a Euro step as his pass rushing move. So it makes a lot of sense when we talk about he needs polish. It's like when you get to the league, you're not going to be able to play defensive tackle like basketball, bro. You're going to have to use your hands and use spin moves and use long arms like everyone else. So that's some of the stuff that he says. And then here's the best thing. And this is why he might be a second, third rounder. For me, I'd be comfortable taking him in the third round. But this is what he said: he could run a 4.8. So, I mean, if he can run a 4.8, I mean that'd be impressive. But I could see some team drooling over him because of that.
The thing with that is, not to cut you off, is okay, great, run a 4.8. That's awesome. We'll high five you and all that stuff. But at this weight, he can't. It doesn't translate to the field anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. Mm-hmm. You know, his short area quickness is what matters, and I don't see that really popping to me. I think he's strong and his strength.
I'd say his first step is great, and he gets into the hole better than most. That's what I think one of his things is his quickness to get there.
I agree with what I'm saying. His first step or two is great. After that is where I'm kind of like, he's good in his box. He's a great telephone booth type player. He's gonna dominate whoever's across from him. After that, I don't see this explosion getting outside the box, playing laterally. That to me is not there. So to me, I don't really care about him running a straight line 40 at a 4.8. I would rather see his shuttle time be more impressive. And his I think he could stand to lose a little bit of weight and get into a little bit of better shape, but he's got to be careful to lose too much weight to where his one redeeming qualities is his overwhelming power. If he drops too much weight where he's now just got average power, he becomes just a completely average player.
Yeah. I think he's got a lot of natural. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say before you go, TFC, I misquoted myself. I'm so sorry. He said he wanted to get down to 325, not 280. I'm very sorry about that.
Okay,
that
makes sense.
He wants to play. He wants to
I
play
think
at 325.
That's perfect. I think that's where he should be. I think that's a healthier, a more flexible weight for him.
Yeah.
We all know that players do things for the team a lot of times, and I if he was asked to get that big, then that makes sense that he would want to then drop the weight and play a little more balanced of a game, especially when nose tackles aren't in demand in the NFL. And it doesn't look like he's had a whole lot of teaching when it comes to his pass rushing moves, which makes sense. You don't really spend a lot of time, if you're NC State, coaching your nose tackle on how to dip or how to do a swim or any of those things. You primarily want him to stop the run and be as good as possible at that. And I think he's flexible and he's got a great body composition, even at 340 or whatever it was. He didn't look to me like he was fat. He carried it all pretty well. And if he can trim some of that and he can gain a little bit more of that sort of sustained speed, I think that opens up the door for a lot of stuff. Now we're talking about ifs and ands at that point, right? So now we're getting into sort of theoretical territory of, what is he going to be in the future? But I like his skill set so much because I don't think he's going to lose that strength. I don't think he's going to lose that run stopping ability. I don't think he's a first round pick because I don't value that at that level. But if it's a late second round pick, I'm into that. I'm into that. I think that is something that's valuable in of itself, where there is nobody on the roster who does it as well as he does if you're the Bills. And if you're in the second round and you've addressed, major holes elsewhere, it is one thing that they have struggled with. And I think if you plug that hole, a lot of things start to work a lot better for the defense.
I would agree. And as we give our closing thoughts about Elaine McNeil, I would be cool if they took him in the third round. If they took him in the second round, I honestly would think that was too high because I'd rather get a guard than him. But he'll be an explosive player, and I think he could come in, like you said, TFC day one and be that, run stuffer, that they need. So you mentioned the word fat, and that will take us to our next prospect. Greg's favorite Greg's favorite prospect, Tyler Shelvin from LSU. He is the big run-stuffing nose tackle that many of you guys have probably seen on on an LSU game, and you was like, man, who is this guy, right? So here's the thing about Tyler Shelvin that bothered me, right? So they said that Tyler Shelvin, his biggest issue is the fact that he cannot control his weight, right? And I read something that said the person that helps him control his weight or that helped him control his weight was his mom, right? So that tells me that you need some extrinsic motivation, and it doesn't come intrinsically. And like someone's gonna have to be on your butt all the time for you to control your weight. And if he doesn't control his weight, he's gonna eat himself right out of the league. But I'm not here to poo-poo on him. All I'm here to say is that those are the type of that's a red flag for me. If you don't have the intrinsic motivation to watch your weight so you can play football and make millions of dollars, that is really alarming to me. But just to give you guys, give the viewers just a real overview from what I saw, he pretty much is going to be pretty dominant in the run game. He definitely eats up all the blocks that you can possibly want. He commands a double team. If you run an inside zone, you need to double team him because that man is thick, he's big, he's powerful, and he rushes like that too. He gives you absolutely nothing when it comes to pass rushing. So, Greg, I know this is your favorite prospect, so talk to the people about Tyler Shelvin.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I don't know, something going on with the frame up top. But Tyler Shelvin, to me, is if there was ever a more one-dimensional type of player, it's Tyler Shelvin. I mean, all he can literally do is stay in one space and push a guy. Outside of that, and when I see all these people saying, "Oh, we got to get him," and I look at everyone every time there's a mock draft put up, and someone's talking about, "Oh, look at my mock draft. Check out my mock draft." Tyler Shelvin seems to be on everybody's mock draft, and I just scratch my head and say, "For what? We're going to dedicate a draft pick to a 360-pound guy who took off last year, and when he was playing, didn't do much outside of eat the line of scrimmage. And he took off last year. So to me, I don't see much upside in this guy at all. He can't leave the A-gaps. And like you talked about earlier, what's his motivation? Do you think, and I'm not going to say for sure, he took off 2020. What do you think a guy who has weight issues and motivation issues was doing in 2020 while he was sitting home?
Getting bigger.
You know what I'm saying? So I have a feeling with this guy that he probably blew up, and I know that was a concern while he was there. So to me, him sitting home, taking a year off, not playing football, not getting better, that's a huge red flag for me, and I have to walk away from that. I want nothing to do with that player. I don't care if he's able to, stuff the line of scrimmage or not. I'm okay with him, and I don't want to touch that guy. I don't want to go anywhere near him.
Andy Dickens says, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Bills were getting beat more around the edge as opposed to between the tackles. The Bills were one of the worst run defenses.
They were getting beat everywhere.
I was just about to say, they were getting beat everywhere, bro.
It was not on the edge. It was everywhere.
Yeah, to answer your question, yeah, you're right. They were getting beat on the edge, inside, wherever you want, they was getting beat. But back to Tyler Shelvin. TFC, what did you see on tape from Tyler Shelvin?
I mean, what Greg said, that there's not a lot of dynamism to his game. He's a big nose tackle, and he's one of those guys, whenever you see this, it's like, yeah, let's bring back old school football. And yeah, the utility of a guy that does one thing and does it well, give him credit. He is a massive human being, and he will make sure that the middle of your defense is really hard to run through. I'll say this. If he does ever get it together and he does learn to control his weight, he's a good athlete. Like, you can see quickness on tape. You can see on film that he is able to, beat blocks and get across faces of guys. It's just like once in a blue moon he does it. It's not like it's a consistent dominant force in his game. So there's always the well, maybe. And the difference between him and Aleem McNeil is that you can see it with McNeil. You can see that right now he is an explosive, athletic guy that he was asked to do one thing and he did it really well. And there's so much more positives to what he does as far as, projecting him to playing outside the A gap to being able to pass rush. With Shelvin, you're just looking at him going, well, he's bigger. And that's all I got. Like, well, he's bigger.
Yep.
He's taller.
Right.
He's got longer
Yeah.
arms, but I don't know how much good. Like, at a certain point, none of that matters if you don't really care about football.
Yeah, and what I was saying, to give like a little synopsis of his game in a more in-depth level, it's like in a league where they're passing the ball more than they ever have and they're running the least amount that they ever have, like his skill set is kind of devalued. So it will only be right, based on the way people play in the league, that he would drop. I said to myself, if I was the Bills and I was thinking about drafting him, it'd have to be day 3, because first of all, you give me
without a
zero.
doubt,
You give me 0 pass rush. 0. Literally. He rushes like you said, Aleem needs to think every play is a run play. That's exactly how Tyler Shelvin rushes, with 2 hands, and he just pushes the guy backwards. That's all he does. And so, but on the flip side of that, as I just mentioned to the guy who just put that comment in about the run game, if he were to be picked by the Bills and be a solid rotational piece, let's say they take Starler Tulele out and put Tyler Shelvin in there to specifically stop the run, and they got him in the 5th or 4th at the highest, I wouldn't hate that. As a rotational piece, I would not hate that. I would, because we know what we're going to get from him. We could clearly see what we're going to get from him on a down-and-down basis. You know, so TFC, yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I was just gonna say, Greg, where would you put him in the rotation? Because it is rotation at nose tackle. Say you drop him in. Where is he going in that rotation as far as the pecking order on who's on the roster right now?
As of right now, I mean, I don't think we have. I mean, you're considering Vernon Butler still there. I think he's behind Star Lutulele in terms of that real one technique, the double team eater. You know, I think based on his size and what you get from him, I think he's better and more adept at playing that technique than anybody else on the roster besides Star. But I think at least with Star, there's a little bit more athleticism and there's a little bit more, obviously, NFL maturity there. But I think if we drafted this kid, like I said, in the 5th round and said, you know, we see a luxury here, we're going to take you, and we just want you to stuff run and push the guy in front of you and get him in the backfield and keep Tremaine Edmonds clean, which I think there is a value in that, because I think Tremaine Edmonds desperately needs to be operating without any traffic in front of him. So there is a value for someone like Shelvin to be drafted. But I think, you know, realistically, as much as I don't like the prospect, I think he would be our second in the rotation in terms of that one technique block eater guy.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, TFC.
I was just going to say, I did State of the Bills for the defensive tackles coming out sometime soon. I wrote it up today, and I looked at who spent the most time in, because there's no nose tackle right here. So we're talking our first 2 tackles are pure nose tackles, but the Bills don't run a pure nose tackle. They if you think about it, the A gap and the B gap, especially last year with Star opting out, it was Harrison Phillips. And then it was, I think it was Vernon Butler next. And then Justin Zimmer had probably the most valuable snaps in the A gap, where he was actually disruptive and he was making plays on the ball. So if you're telling me we're taking Tyler Shelvin at any point in the draft, he's behind Harrison Phillips for sure. Let's say that you then bring Star back for this year. He's probably behind him. And you've got to convince me that he's better than Justin Zimmer, who you already have on the roster and who's on there for, is valuable in the role that he plays as kind of a hybrid. And I don't see where he fits in the rotation unless he's replacing somebody. And I don't think he's particularly better than any of those guys, except for he's bigger.
Well,
he's bigger.
Here's a weird part here is that you've actually kind of forced me now to take a stance in defense of Shelvin. So, but what I'm saying, you look at Zimmer and you look at Phillips, and they're kind of pretty much one and the same type of build in what they do. Now, they're productive from the one technique, not because they're eating blocks and owning the line of scrimmage, because they're just more athletic and they have enough power to separate from that guard and get in the backfield and be active in the backfield. But as you saw this year, that didn't really help. That style of play didn't help our middle linebacker. We had a lot of traffic from the line of scrimmage getting into his face. Now, I think that's a problem that we have to figure out up front and with Tremaine Edmonds individually of him learning how to get over the top of blocks and being quicker to react, but that's a whole nother show. But I think those two guys were more productive because they play the technique a little bit differently. They play it more kniving and getting through and being disrupted instead of where Lutalele plays it, eating the block, and then everything else after that is secondary. Where I think Phillips and Zimmer get to the ball, everything else after that is secondary.
Yeah, Andy, we appreciate you showing love to the show. To your point, Zimmer graded over 70 for PFF this year, and I was quite surprised when I looked at that. And that's like he basically what that says is that when he was on the field, like you said, TFC, he was productive. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, he was the most productive out of the A gap. I mean, that pretty much goes the grade in his play, came together. And I think Justin Zimmer has earned himself, a spot on his team somewhere on his defensive line. I don't know where, but he earned a spot. He played well enough. Even the Tyreek Hill interview before the Super Bowl, he was like, that number 61, I don't remember his name, but, he was out there putting in work. And so, I mean, going to Tyler Shelvin, though, I think he has value for the Bills. Like you said, if he's just in there to stop the run and to keep Tremaine Edmonds clean, I think there's a lot of value in that because, Tremaine Edmonds already struggles as it is. And then the Bills were the 5th worst run defense in the whole NFL, and were still able to win 15 games. So just imagine if they were able to be middle of the pack with run defense. So as we close up on Greg's favorite prospect of Tyler Shelvin, where do you guys see him being drafted? Like, realistically, what round?
Yeah, I think realistically, the 4th round is probably about the time you'll start looking at him. I don't think it's a very deep defensive tackle class, but it's even thinner when you're looking for the big body run stuffer guy. I think there's only a real handful of those type of players. So I think by default, Shelvin's going to climb in some boards if teams are looking for, the mamma jamma in the middle. So I think 4th round, I would say is a realistic landing point for him and a starting point for him. I think if he goes higher than that, I think someone's really, really reaching on that kid. Unless we get reports that he's just had this 2020, that he's just been working like an animal, dropped the weight, and he's, stopped eating shit, and he comes out and plays like a monster, then okay. But I don't think we're going to get those reports.
Yeah, I would rather somebody else make that mistake. Like somebody else take the chance on Tyler Shelvin. I guess I don't view the roster the same way looking at Harrison Phillips. I think he is a viable one tech playing out of the A gap. I think he does play with good power and good base. That was what he was best at Stanford when he was, playing. I think he played nose there a good bit. And he's the only guy on the roster that has like long arms and can actually like separate blocks and stuff like that. So I don't see the massive need for a guy who isn't athletic. What I want a guy, and I don't mean to keep bringing this guy up, but Lee McNeil has athleticism. Like he can move and he's strong. I don't need a guy who's not valuable at more than one thing. So if he was there in the 6th, 7th round, sure. Like, take a flyer, but not before then. Like no valuable assets go towards this run only player.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm on both sides of the coin. If someone took him before the 4th round, I'd be upset. But if you took him like 4 through 7, I can understand it. You know what I mean? But I mean, there's points to both of them. But in terms of like positional value and what he can do, I'm kind of with you guys. Like, take him on a flyer. So as we move to our 3rd prospect and my favorite prospect, and I'm gonna try to get his name right, Levi Onwuzurike.
Onwuzurike.
Levi Onwuzurike. I don't want to be on here messing people's names up, but that is the defensive tackle from Washington. Very, very, very explosive guy. He has really, strong hands. I thought he split blocks really well. Very, very athletic. He's able to shed well. He's a legit game record. That's what I have in my notes. I just have so quick with that first step. I think he can be a high-end move piece. And I think he needs to work on his pass rushing plan. So he was also on the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast, and he is currently training at Exos down in San Diego, Florida. His mentality is that he is looking to F up anybody that is across from him. That he said that is his mentality. So I like that. And he says he watches a lot of Fletcher Cox and Gerald McCoy, and he says if he wants to do some really, really freaky SHIT, he watches Aaron Donald. So he opted out this year. So TFC, I want to know, what did you see from Levi Onwuzurike?
Well, because he opted out of 2020, I didn't see a whole lot specifically, but everything that you said, I mean, it hit it right on the head as far as explosive. I think plays stronger than his size, and I'm always looking for that in defensive tackle. 6'3". I'm not sure about arm length. He looks like he's got long arms and he can stack and shed and all of those things. But, what Greg said is like there's a lot of undersized guys in this class. And I feel like if there were legitimate defensive tackles that didn't have question marks, he would be lower down on people's draft boards. If you're getting this guy in, if you're getting him in the position of taking over for Quentin Jefferson, I think that might be valuable. But I don't know specifically like where I would take him, given I don't think he played a lot of run snaps. So he didn't play a ton of run snaps when he was on the field. He was a pass rushing specialist last year for Washington. And when he was good when he was on the field playing the run, but I didn't see how he took on double teams. I didn't see how he was able to, if he had a bad game, bounce back from it. So I have a lot of questions about him. And this year, I don't think you have a lot of draft capital, and you certainly don't have a lot of cap space to make mistakes like that. So for me, I see why everyone likes him. I'm just hesitant because I think that there's a lot of information lacking about Onwuzurike.
Yeah, man, and it sucks when a prospect like that, opts out because we can't see what we want to see from him. We can't make sure what we saw was a fluke. That's why opting out sucks. I mean, I understand everything with COVID. I get it. You know what I mean? But it just would be nice to see, see you do it more than once. I mean, his grading profile was awesome. If I'm not mistaken, he had an 80 grade his first year, 90 this last year, and then obviously he opted out. So, I mean, Greg, tell us what you saw from Levi.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing you guys' point, Trevor Lawrence could have opted out of 2020, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eye and said, oh, we need to see more film. There's certain players didn't need to play this year, in all realistically. Guys like Onwuzurike needed to play this year. We needed to see him take that next step and put the whole thing together. So we didn't get to see that, but what I did see, and he was one of the first defensive linemen I actually put in and watched, I don't think there's a better stacker in this draft than him, especially on the defensive line. He is able to, on every single play, every engagement he is snapping someone's head back. If he's on the backside in the plays, you'll still see an offensive lineman get pushed a yard into the backfield on every single play. So I think his raw power, his first power step, his gather, his hands are awesome. I think they're one of the best I've seen in the draft so far, and that's even talking about the other top two guys we're going to get into a little bit later. So I love that about him. If you watch his highlight film, you're saying to yourself, wow, this dude is a game wrecker. This guy is just wreaking havoc. And then you look at his stat sheet and say, well, geez, man, he really didn't get to the quarterback all that much. He didn't really make a ton of impact plays. So the talent is definitely there with this guy. I think where a lot of other people need to work on their technique in a sense of being that guy, I think he's got that base already. So that's a huge advantage for him coming out, that he's got that technical base. He's got the foundation to start with. He's got a great step. He knows how to use his hands. I think the things that he's lacking a little bit is kind of playing with that flexibility and using and being a little bit quicker. And like you said, he is training, and I've seen a couple of those videos. He seems like he's got a hell of a work ethic, and he's going to work on those things. But I like the kid a lot in terms of he's a 3 technique. He played all across the line. You watch, he's in a 0, he's in a 3, he's in a 1, he's in a 5, he's in a 6. He's all over the place. So there's a lot of versatility with him. But I like the prospect overall.
EJ,
go.
I was going to ask you
in
your analysis, or when you were looking him up, do you know why he didn't play in the Senior Bowl? Like why he didn't play in the game?
Oh, I did not see.
I didn't know if he was injured or he got nicked up during the week, but I saw he didn't play in the Senior Bowl and he didn't play in 2020, and without knowing why, and I don't want to cast any judgment about that.
Yeah.
But that was a thing to me that I was a little surprised by. If you're going to go to the Senior Bowl and you're going to go through the week of practice and then not play after not playing in 2020, that was kind of one of the things that started me down the path of he's only played 225 run snaps last year. So even when he did play, and I see everything you guys are seeing, like I see the explosion, I see the great handwork, I just have questions like there. I don't know enough to feel comfortable about this guy who is going to be coveted because of all the physical skills you guys are talking about.
Absolutely, and like I said, I just wish he didn't have this high-end year, just this one high-end year, because, I fell in love watching his tape, and I don't like falling in love with prospects. I like to keep my analysis objective, but I fell in love, watching him. So TFC, you're really good at, projecting, how these guys will fit in the Bills lineups. First of all, if the Bills were to draft Levi, where do you feel comfortable with them drafting him? And if he is drafted by the Bills, where do you see him? Like, where do you see his role being?
So he's a 3 technique. I think that's pretty clear that he's going to be a pass rushing 3 technique, which is another concerning thing about you're going to have to get him in the 3rd round unless people forgot about him because of the reasons that we just talked about where he didn't play and all those things. You might see him in the 4th round, but I wouldn't be surprised if he went in the 2nd or the early 3rd. And the concern I have with if you're going to do that is you've already got Ed Oliver. So he's going to replace Quentin Jefferson, which means you're cutting Quentin Jefferson. And then you've got a 3rd-year defensive tackle who should take a step forward this year, but also has some question marks, and he hasn't played up to that 9th overall pick yet. And then you've got a rookie who hasn't played football in 18 months. So I'd be concerned having 2-3 techniques on the roster with that profile. And that's where I think he'd fit in the rotation. I don't think it's a great fit just because of the timing of everything. If you felt like really good about Ed Oliver, and I know the Bills do specifically, I don't feel sold on everything yet. I'd be concerned going into a really important year in 2021 with those 2 guys. So if you want to take him in the 3rd round, I think that in a draft, as Brandon Beane says, that you've got to nail the draft. I don't know that this guy is a profile of a guy that like you nailed it.
Greg, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And that his value to us would be where we got him. To nail the draft.
Absolutely.
If we saw him late in the 3rd round and said, hey, you know what? Let's pull the trigger on this kid. We've seen enough, of him, and we know what his potential is and his ability. A 3rd round for him that's my starting point for him. And we don't have the 4th round, but if we saw him in the 4th round and said, hell, you know what, we're going to parlay these 2 5s and move up or something. But yeah, it's tough doing these shows, not knowing where the roster is going to be and who's going to come and who's going to go in terms of projecting them there. But I think we all got kind of an idea that we're going to be trimming some fat in that defensive line. And like you said, bringing him in would kind of give us another Ed Oliver, and we're not even certain with Ed Oliver. So looking at our team, we have holes elsewhere. Obviously, I think we all agree the linebacker position is going to need to be filled. Cornerback too. Are we keeping a right tackle? We're going to have to get another one. Our interior offensive line. It was John Brown coming or going. So is picking up a luxury 3 technique at this point, and we just got done raving about, Zimmer and Phillips is back for another year, is picking up a luxury 3 technique who's didn't play in 2020, even though I love this dude's get off. I like his toughness and everything like that. I think he's got great hands. I wouldn't touch him to the 3rd round.
If you had an extra 3rd, I think it'd be a no-brainer. But, you've got a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, right? Yeah, that's the luxury. You're right, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I have down here in my notes. I got 2nd, 3rd round. I can see him, I can see, like I said, I fell in love with his tape. So it's like I'm projecting as to what he can be, and like you said, TFC, if they had an extra 3rd and he's there, it'd be tough, especially with the struggles that the Bills that had on their defensive line. I'd be hard pressed to see them not even at least give him a look, at least think about taking him.
That's why I don't think he'll be there for us when I think it's the right time to pull the trigger, because you're going to look at another team that has, the 1 technique in place. Where they're looking for the 3 technique, he makes a ton of sense in the 2nd round for somebody who's looking for a 3 technique who could possibly do the things that he can do. So
I could see Seattle really liking him.
That's what I say. Somebody that's already got a big 1 in place. that's saying, hey, you know what? Now we just need a guy who's going to be able to kind of eat a one-on-one matchup every time, and he's the guy. He's going to be very difficult to block one-on-one just because of how powerful he is off the get-off. So it'd be nice if something, guys fall, and if he fell to the third, it wouldn't be a bad move for us right there to then say, hey, you know what? Let's get a safety guy.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm all in on Levi Onwuzurike. And
there you go.
Bills took him. Yeah.
If I could jump in here too, though, guys,
Yes,
I'm actually very, very disappointed about how tonight's going. Not one of you, myself included, has said the word repertoire yet.
Well, I jinxed it last time. I couldn't be the first one.
Hey.
All the people we've described tonight, nobody had a repertoire. None of these guys have any repertoires tonight. I mean, come on.
No, they don't, because we started with nose tackles.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's my fault. I should. You know what? You're right.
Yeah.
Those guys didn't have repertoires. You're right.
Well, but you're right.
Man.
Somebody had to break the dam and say repertoire, and I'm glad it was you, because you started it last time and it was perfect.
Yeah,
now
Greg
it doesn't
was,
sound. Now it doesn't sound genuine if we say it. So it's gonna sound weird.
Right. So maybe somebody will get repertoire off when we talk about our next prospect, Christian Barmore. Christian Barmore is the first Alabama. You know, we had to talk about an Alabama defensive lineman. Y'all know how I go with Alabama defensive linemen. They go high in the draft and they go early and they go often. Christian Barmore, by many people's boards, is the #1 defensive tackle prospect in this draft. I'm going to be honest, I did not see that from him. I do think he's really well. One thing I did notice on tape when I was watching the tape that I did have to see, I noticed that his hands is really active. And what I mean by that is he gets his hands up a lot, on pass rushes. And honestly, that's a skill that you don't see from defensive linemen all the time. They don't always get their hands up, you know what I mean? And that's a great thing, especially when you go in the league. You play those shorter quarterbacks because shorter quarterbacks are kind of like a thing in the league now. And if you can, add value to yourself by batting passes down at the line of scrimmage, I like that. So, Greg, tell me what you saw from Christian Barmore.
I mean, I think he's the best defensive tackle in the draft. I think he's 6'5", 310 pounds. The picture right there, he's built extremely well, and he's athletic. When you watch this guy move around and how he changes direction, and he's got real loose hips, and he's able to, stutter step. He'll jab hard left, cut back, cross face right, and just leaves people trying to block air. That's impressive. And I think that's the thing that people look at and say, wow, it's hard to find a guy with his size and with his athleticism. And when you watch his tape and you do see the things that he does, it's utterly impressive. And I think that right there, the ceiling is so high with this guy, where he's able to dominate physically up front. And he also has that next level ability to pass rush, and he's, I think he finished last year with 8 sacks, which I think is pretty damn impressive for a guy his size. But if you watch how he gets there, he's not just a cleanup guy. Some of these dudes, they'll fall on a sack. He creates the pass rush on his own.
He's got some edge bend too.
That's what I'm saying. He's very, very loose in the hips. He's flexible. So he creates on his own. And there's a couple times, and he hits these swim moves, and he sets it up with a real hard club. He swims it. So he understands. He's got a really good repertoire of pass rush moves, if you will.
There we go. Yes, sir.
Yes.
But,
Yes,
but
sir.
I mean, joking aside, he does have that. He's got a good foundation of pass rush moves. And you're looking at a guy with his size, it's hard not to love that. And even though his stats say that he's primarily a pass rusher, you don't see him getting manhandled at the line of scrimmage. You don't see him just loafing around when it's a run play. I think his problem is that his ability, he should be a top 5 pick. He has that ability, but yet it wasn't displayed consistently throughout the season. And I think that's kind of the hang up on this guy. And I know Alabama's got a ton of talent and they rotate a lot of players up front, but a player of Christian Barmore's size and ability, we should have seen him more consistent production throughout the year, and we didn't see that. Yes, the pass rushing numbers are eye-popping, but his ability, he's a legitimate top 5 pick to me, ability-wise.
He's got some pad level issues. Like, that's the thing I've noticed the most is, like you just said, all those things are absolutely true about a guy like that. And that's when I watched this tape, I was like, where is it? And then you see it, and it's like, oh, okay, so then he turns it on and turns it off. My biggest issue, I think, is the consistency where he doesn't keep his pad level down and he doesn't hold up in the run game. I think he's a good run defender right now, and I don't think that it's a stretch to say he's a complete defensive tackle. But to me, he was the cleanest guy when it came to evaluation of everything you just said. His repertoire is he's the only one that has one
Yes,
that we're going to
sir.
talk about tonight. He's the only one that has like multiple moves that he can go to. And he's bendy, he's athletic, he's just not consistent in his, I don't want to say effort, but I want to say his attention to details, because he should be dominant and he isn't. And to me, that tells me the first thing I notice is he gets up a little bit, especially in the run game. He holds up against double teams and he can split them, but every once in a while he just gets pushed downfield 4 yards. And to me, that's like, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay if I'm getting everything else. But I think he's a clean prospect who, if he plays like he does on tape right now, he's a very good defensive tackle. I don't know that he's the next Gerald McCoy. I don't know that he's the next, because I don't see the same power.
I don't think he plays like that yet, and I think that's what the problem is. That it's there. He'll flash, and you'll say, "Wow, why is that not?" He's obviously good enough. He's going up in the SEC against some of the best players, and he's doing that. It makes it almost look easy. And then it's not consistent. I think that's the kind of part makes you go, well, why? Why is this kid not turning it on all the time? Why is he not intense and dominating every play? Because he could do it. He physically, no doubt, can do it. Why is he not?
Yeah, and I think that makes him a very good player. Like right now, as he is, everything you see on film, he's going to be a very good player. I want to see more power from him. I want to see a little more bull rush. I want to see a little more sandpaper in his play. And that's what I think he's missing. And if he finds that, then yeah, he's going to be dominant. But until then, he's going to be another very good 3 technique in a sea of very good 3 techniques in the NFL. Like, there's a lot of really good guys that pass rush from the interior now. And I think he does have the versatility to play a couple different positions in the league, but that would be, I think, where he fits best.
Right. And right on cue, Andrew Bronxdale, thank you for showing the show love. High ceiling for him in the right hands, just what you just said, TFC. So one of the things that I think you always want to see from a defensive tackle prospect, going back to you, Greg, is you want to see the pass rushing. And I hate to go back to that, but it's important. Again, as I mentioned before when we did Aleem McNeil, in a league where everyone is passing more than ever, you got to get pressure from pretty much every angle, every angle you can. And Greg, talk about, since you played the position, talk about how important it is. And this is always what I want, our viewers to understand if they watch our show. I want them to understand the how. Like, I want you to explain to the people, why is it so important to have good hands and good pad level when playing defensive tackle?
I mean, you go all the way back to Pop Warner with that. The game is all about, leverage and winning the matchup, and everything starts up front. So obviously for a defensive tackle to win that matchup is the quickest off the ball, the first to engage, the first to win at the pad level and get their hands on and control the other guy, usually has that advantage. I look at the biggest key to everything to me is block recognition and how they transition off of that. You could have a great athlete and a great player out there, and if he doesn't understand block recognition and what that is telling him, and when you learn how to play the position cerebrally, blocks are going to tell you where the football's going. So when you're getting hands on people and you're feeling the body, that man is trying to cross your face and reach your outside shoulder. Now that's telling me where the football's going. So I was always told, feel blocks with your hands, see the football with your eyes. So I'm able to hear. I don't need to stare at the guy that's blocking me to know where the ball's going. I could feel what he's doing and where he's going. So when I have my hands on him, that's where it all starts. So then from there to transition is, I got him, I'm feeling where the block is going, and now I'm seeing where the ball's going. That transition for me now to be a playmaker is important. I think Barmore has that. He's able to get control of the blocks, field blocks, and transition now. I've recognized, I now know what the play is. I'm transitioning to a playmaker. And that's when I watch defensive tackles, that's what I look for. Are you able to control the block, recognize what it is, see the ball, transition to a playmaker?
So TFC, since this is also your area of expertise, let's just say in some crazy scenario, Christian Barmore drops to the Bills at 30, and they do draft him, right? Where do you see him fitting in, and what do you see his role being? Do you see him taking snaps away from Ed Oliver? Do you see him playing alongside Ed Oliver? What do you see his role being, and where would you feel comfortable taking him?
Well, that's the tricky part is I think that if you're doing roster construction, there's not a great place for him because of what Ed Oliver is for you, which is your franchise three technique defensive tackle, which is a lot of what Sean McDermott builds his defense on, is that front four. You'd be wasting him, I think, at the one technique. If you were playing him in the A gap all the time, I think you're wasting what could be a dominant pass rusher. So then do you change your defense to get them both on the field at the same time? I don't think that's a good idea either. If they took him, to me, that tells me they're going to move Ed Oliver back to where he was in college and say, we think you can win as a pass rusher better from the A gap than the B gap. And I don't see that happening. And I don't think that they would do that. I don't think that they would think that. I don't know that that's a good idea. So really, the only problem I have with the whole scenario is the fit. Because what you're doing, again, it's another one of those luxury picks, and we've talked about it this year. There are so many potential needs. Free agency starts, I think, next week. We'll find out some of what's going to happen before then. But you're going to have a lot of needs. And I think that specifically a three technique this year would be a hard ask in the first 2 to 3 rounds.
Okay. So, like I said, the consensus is that Barmore, is the number one defensive tackle prospect. He's probably the most polished, out of all these guys. And like I said, in some, crazy scenario, if he were to drop at the Bills, I don't think it would be, a bad pick. Like you said, TFC, it would just be about, where could they, like, realistically, play him or see him, working out. So, I mean, I like Christian Barmore, but the fit is everything, in the league. So, as
if the Bills, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. If the Bills are in the position where they can take Christian Barmore at 30, where like everything else is set, look out, because that's an awesome value, and that's an awesome player to put on your defensive line. You can do some creative stuff, but if you're not, that's where I would get concerned.
Yeah, and one thing, just to add a little nugget about the draft, I've done extensive, research on the draft, and I, like I said, I want people when they watch this show to to learn something. Like I had Greg talk about, the important stuff on the defensive line. That is the stuff that you need to see on Sunday when you're watching on Sundays. Like, that's the stuff you need to look for. And in terms of the draft, the draft, like TFC just mentioned, is about finding value. It's not about trying to fill a need. You don't fill your needs in the draft. You don't take an unproven player to fill something that you need. Obviously, just thinking about it common sense wise, you take the best player available. And the example I always use is Dallas last year. Dallas did not need CeeDee Lamb, but they drafted CeeDee Lamb, and look how well he turned out for them. That's why you always grab the best player available, or you just grab, a player that's just going to add value to your roster. So as we transition to our last defensive tackle prospect, we have Daviyon Nixon from Iowa. And a couple little nuggets on Daviyon Nixon. He went to Iowa Western, which is a JUCO, so he did not go to Iowa straight out of high school. He also has a basketball background, and his father is a heavy influence in his life, which is what I like to see, as opposed to a guy like Tyler Shelvin, who needs to be motivated by his mother to keep his weight down. So I like to see that. And his dad was saying that him going to JUCO allowed him to develop and become a better player. And it only makes sense. You spend 2 years at a JUCO and you're able to hone your skills. And then when he went to Iowa, he had to work his way into the rotation. The coaches talked about how he worked very hard, and then his father mentioned that when he sees him come out of the tunnel, it brings tears to his eyes, because he just puts so much work and so much effort into getting better, and now he's on this platform now to be drafted pretty highly in the draft this year. So TFC, I want you to talk about what you saw from Daviyon Nixon.
So I think the first thing is he's a professional run stopper. Like, he gets into his gap. He's a quick penetrator for a big guy. I think he's like 6'3", 305. So he's got, prototypical size, quickness. I know Greg really likes him. The thing that I just was really bothered by is he has such a meandering pass rush. He doesn't stay in his gap as well as I'd like. and he doesn't use his hands as well as I'd like. So, I think that there's a lot of wasted potential when it comes to a guy that's kind of running around and doesn't know what he's doing from a pass rushing standpoint. He gets stuck on blocks if he doesn't win immediately. But if you're looking for another solid Iowa run defender, he does check that box, and he is a big-bodied physical guy with, I think a good anchor and a guy that splits double teams pretty well, feels blocks, sheds them really well. But I just didn't see it when it comes to his pass rush. Like, I didn't see anything. Not even a repertoire. He didn't have a move that I liked.
Yes, sir. Speaking of big body, he is 6'3", 305. So, I mean, there you go. And then he also played with AJ Epinesa. So, I mean, if he was, to be drafted by the Bills.
Reunite the
reunite.
I never thought I'd want an
ends.
Iowa defensive line because they're just so average in speed. Like they're like, there's one thing, and I said this about Epinesa on the last podcast. It's like what Iowa does is they take good athletes and they say, you need to fit this box, and we need you to do that, or else you won't see the field. And I don't think there's a lot of focus on pass rush from Iowa. And I think that's evident in his tape too. Like if he's just not been taught the same way of like, we're going to drill the run game and you're going to stop every outside zone. But when you go get the quarterback, try really hard. You're starting from a disadvantage heading into the NFL.
Greg, did you say in our group chat that you thought Davion Nixon was the number one defensive tackle prospect on your board?
Originally, I had him up there. I thought I saw, like I said, we've talked earlier. This is not a very stellar class. There's a lot of mediocrity in it. There's, some guys that are kind of just the big bodies. There's some undersized 3 techniques. So we're not dealing with, years past where we had a ton of guys that were legitimate top 10 picks. That's not this draft. What I liked from him, I liked his technique. I think he's got very good technique. I think he's good all around. I mean, I don't think he's probably not the best pass rushing here, but I think he has a lot of upside as a pass rusher because he is a very good athlete. So that's something that can come. And if Iowa wasn't necessarily focusing on pass rush, requiring that from the defensive linemen to be stellar pass rushers, that's okay. But what I did see from this guy is he had very good technique, and he did what I just was speaking on, is that he transitions very well. He's able to get his hands in front of him, get on the lineman, read a block, and transition and be a playmaker. I think he made like 60 tackles this year. I think that's a lot for a 3 technique or a guy who's been bouncing. It's a lot of activity, especially in this day of football. You see guys that you consider active in the 20, 30 tackle range. He was at 60 tackles-ish, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a very active guy. You see him. He's good from the backside. He's got the athleticism to chase down from the backside. So to me, that's something where I like to see that. When you see a guy who just gets in, wins his block, and it's kind of like, oh, well, pass the run past me, I'm good. He's active. He'll chase down. He'll be active 5-10 yards downfield because he hustles and he's got great pursuit. So those are the things that I liked about him. And I think he's got a lot of upside athleticism. He's very smooth. I think he's got that, kind of bendy hip to him. He's got a little bit of twitch to him. So even though his pass rush didn't result in a lot of production, I do see him use his hands well. I think like with TFC, when he gets stuck, he goes from like 60 down to 0 very fast, and it's hard for him to kind of get the motor going again. But to me, that stuff you can coach that. You can coach a counter move. Epinesa dealt with the same thing this year. He was great in his get-off. When he won his get-off and got to the edge, he looked great. When he got stopped, he really didn't have a plan and say, well, okay, how do I win this now? So those things to me can be taught. Counter moves can be taught. So I'm not taking away from him from that. So I had him 1 because I thought he was the most complete of what I saw. But the more I watched Barmore play and said to myself, here's a guy who's 6'5", his ceiling is just way too high. So I moved him down to number 2. So I got Barmore 1, Nixon 2.
Do you think he's more explosive than Barmore? Because I think that his explosiveness is really what his strength is.
I think so too, but he's also not 6'5". I think when you look at that package of what Barmore is and is able to do with that size, and he's probably just as athletic. His Go ahead.
That's what I meant. Is their athleticism, I'd say, is on par in different skill sets, but I think that they're both some of the most athletic guys in the draft.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. But that's why I had him one for a little bit, and I went with Barmore. I think finalizing the list as him being my number one because the pass rush ability. Like I said, that's where this NFL is heading. And when teams are throwing the ball 60-70% of the time, to have a guy who's 6'5", 315 pounds, who's athletic enough and has a good enough repertoire of pass rush moves to be productive.
Yay.
That's a big thing right there. So I have Barmore one. I think he's got more upside. But Nixon, to me, I think he's a potential, back end of the first round. If someone, if a team like a Kansas City or someone like that, or if Tampa, loses out on a couple of their D linemen, and they went with Nixon, late in the first, it wouldn't shock me. I think his value is best in the second round.
TFC, where do you think his value lies?
That's a tough one for me because I really wasn't impressed. Again, Greg's done a great job of convincing me that I was wrong, and I do think that I do think that I'm missing something when it comes to Nixon, and part of it is I didn't see as much tape. I'll be completely honest. I don't ever want to BS people. I didn't see as much tape as Greg, and I don't think I got the full picture of seeing some of those high end reps, especially getting to the quarterback specifically. So I'd say probably I'd honestly defer to Greg as far as like second or third round. That would be probably where he goes.
Yep, TFC, I'm right there with you. What's tough about this draft evaluations is that you can watch broadcast, it's cool, but you want to watch A22 tape because you want to be able to see, like Greg is talking about, how they use their hands, how they shed blocks, block recognition. Honestly, you can't tell all of that from broadcast view.
And that's to your point. I about 2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody had thrown up I know we're going back in time here, but a Tyler Shelvin play. And they were like, look at this guy just dominate. And I literally was like, do you see what he's doing? He's winning by alignment, and he's still getting reached by the backside guard. So that is a completely terrible, terrible play by him. The backside guard was able to cross his face and reach his play side shoulder.
From the nose tackle.
And that's what I'm saying. That's
a zero.
He didn't engage the center, missed the center. Now the linebacker's getting blocked, and the backside guard was able to cross him and keep him from making the play. But you're high on the fact that he took up 2 blockers, which, what I'm saying? So I think I watch football, and I think there's a big guy who could do some things up front, and I think that applies to a lot of these guys that, oh, wow, did you see this play, or there's a sack, or there's a lot of the intricacies, especially in the line. Obviously, I'm a defensive lineman, so I see them, and that's no matter what football goes on, that's what I watch. I look. That's where I watch, and that's where my eyes stay the entire time. But there's a lot of intricacies into the defensive line, and I think overall this year the talent is lower, and I think there's guys that we've talked about tonight that in drafts past would probably be pushed into middle day 2 that are now getting catapulted into possibly the back end of day 1, just because it's a very, very thin class.
Yeah, and you mentioned that same sentiment when we were talking about, defensive ends. There's a lot of, developmental, picks in this draft. And if this was a regular draft, regular year, they probably, be third, fourth round picks. But now they're being catapulted, into the first round, unfortunately. But, that's just kind of, where we're at right now.
That's the kind of year it is, yeah.
Yeah, so as we wrap up our show, do we have any defensive tackle prospects that were not on this list but that we're high on? So TFC, I know you have some. So who's your defensive tackle prospects to watch and that you're high on?
Yeah, and it's a guy that we all know, Marvin Wilson of Florida State. I think that this is the reason I like him. If we're talking about what the Bills need specifically, is they need a guy to play in the A gap that has pass rushing ability, that has power, and that can, as Greg talked about, read blocks and disengage. Marvin Wilson has done that for 3 years now. This past year was not a good year, and I think a lot of that has to do with, if you remember before the season, basically he and the rest of the team boycotted their coaching staff because of some comments that they made in the offseason. So I don't know if he was particularly motivated, even if he did play this year. He is a big physical guy who I think if you slow and steady wins the race with Marvin Wilson. He's powerful, and sometimes it looks like he's blocked, but he's never blocked. Like he never is able, like no one's ever able to actually block him out of a play. He just disengages, I think, and reads a little longer than most guys. I'm fine with that because he always finds his way to the ball. He's got power, he's got length, he's got an anchor. And if you're telling me that I need somebody to go next to Ed Oliver, that's what I'm looking for in this class. I'm not looking for another 3 technique. I'm not looking for a nose. You know, as much as I like to Lee McNeil and all those other guys, what I'm looking for is a guy that can slot in next to and play in a complementary role to Ed Oliver. And I think Marvin Wilson is the perfect guy for that. He's a guy that does all those things and is strong. Like there are not a lot of strong physical guys on this roster. And that's what I'm looking for, you know, and he's the only one to me that still has the same athleticism. He's slow, and I don't think that he's got like a great 40 time, but he'll surprise you with quickness. He'll surprise you with athleticism where all of a sudden he's a gap over and you didn't expect that. I like that. I want that on this roster because I think he provides the right type of size and the right type of physicality to complement and that missing slot of what they need.
I agree 100%. I like Marvin Wilson. The more I watch him, the more I fell in love with him. He does, I think the last 2 years, he did deal with some season-ending injuries where he lost a lot of time. So, you know, obviously that's a flag there. But like you said, he's not one-dimensional. He could serve a purpose by being a one technique and eating blocks, but that's not his. He's not limited to that. He will offer us some because he is talented enough and athletic enough to become a disruptor and a contributor as a pass rusher and as somebody who could be mobile enough to play around inside the box and make plays and, you know, to a limited extent, chase people down from behind. So
he played 5 technique this past year. They moved him for a couple games to the edge to play 5, and he wasn't terrible.
No, and that's what I'm saying, that he's obviously that's not going to translate to the NFL, but you could see that athleticism from a one technique would be extremely beneficial. And like I said, we're at that point now, especially we're tired of just being mediocre up front. It's about time we get some people who could be disruptive, who can actually do these things. I'm so tired of watching other teams with these mad dog defensive linemen who are just getting things done. And we're here like, oh, well, maybe next year he'll get it. And, oh, if we bring in this guy. And to me, it's like now is the time to grab some of these dudes and get it done. You know, I like him a lot. I think I wouldn't mind him in the second round, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Marvin Wilson, like last year, was slotted to be the number 1 defensive tackle in the draft. But, I mean, he went back to school. And then, like you said, TFC, you know, Florida State was just a bad program all around last year. I mean,
yeah,
I can't really point to one person or one thing that was really good about that program. Greg, you mentioned in the last show that everybody's highlight tape was against their O-line last year. They were just a bad program across the board. But,
it's hard to stay motivated, right? Like I thought he played hard in games, but it's really hard to dominate and stay motivated when it's the third quarter and you're down by 30 points. Like what at that point you're playing for your tape, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, you go from being the number 1 defensive tackle prospect to like 4th, 5th, or 6th now, and it's just like I didn't see that. Every time I've watched Marvin Wilson, he's been dominant. Besides like this year, but you know every time I've watched him, he's been dominant. And if the Bills were to seriously look at him, that would be a pick that I would love for them to make. So, guys, are there any other defensive tackle prospects that we would like to mention?
I'm going to tell you right now, I got a guy that probably not a lot of people know about or is on their radar. And my mock draft that I'm dropping soon, I have the Bills taking him in with one of our 5th-round picks. I'm sorry, our 6th-round pick is to Daryl Slayton out of University of Florida. 6'5", 330 pounds, built extremely well, very athletic for his size. When he's dialed in, and it's like a lot of these guys in this draft, when they're on, he is extremely disruptive. He plays with a first-round talent. His problem is complete work ethic and consistency, and that's why he drops. But I think when people start looking at this kid and seeing what he's able to do, you watch even just his highlight film and some of the plays that he's able to make and just absolutely pushes mountains when he's coming forward and he's dialed in. I think he's a guy, take a fly around in the 6th round. I would be extremely happy with that. I think he's a developmental one technique with that upside, that he's not just a block eater, that he does have a little bit of that short area quickness to give us something else besides block eating. So to Daryl Slayton, you mark it down later on around day 3, Daryl Slayton, University of Florida.
All right, got our defensive tackle sleeper. So First of all, I want to thank all the people who watched this live stream tonight and showed us love. Mud Dog, it's not the same without you, but thank you for showing love to the stream. Even though you're here in spirit. We see all your comments, and thank you for everyone else who participated. So again, since I dropped the ball on my producing skills and did not put where you can find us, I want everyone to run through one more time where they can find you. So TFC, tell the fans one more time where they can find you.
At Thomas Frank Carr on Twitter.
And Greg.
The Sports Bully 1 on Twitter.
Alrighty, and then you can find.
Does that make us old that we only have Twitter?
I have more. I just don't know the names of the other accounts, so I'm not gonna bother throwing them out there. And
I only have Twitter. I think I'm bad at this. Is what I'm.
Yeah, like I got Twitter, Snapchat, and Insta, but I don't know how active everyone is. But if you hit me on Twitter, you will most certainly get a reaction from me. But thank you again for all of the viewers for watching our live stream. Next live stream will be the same time, 9 p.m. Thursday. We will be discussing. We're going to switch it, and we're going to go to the running backs, and we're going to talk about the running backs the Bills should look at. There's been a lot of talk about the Bills need a running back. The Bills need a running back. I'm not on that train, but there are some running backs I think they could potentially look at to bring in, and be, that third back. So again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening, and join us again Thursday, 9 p.m. for the Running Backs Draft Prospect Show.